Okay, well, it is 1:05 and I like to start on time. I don't know about everyone else, but we've got a full panel and conversation. So I'd like to get started and just welcome everyone for being here today. Thank you for attending. Let's get ready to begin. So first of all, greetings, everyone. I am Dr. Seanelle Hawkins, and I'm honored to be here. I'm a proud Levine Center Steering Committee member. I'm also the president and CEO of the Urban League of Rochester. And today I'm honored to serve as your moderator for the panel. It is my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panel. I'm not going to review their full bios because that's available on the Brave Spaces website. But today, please join me in welcoming Mubrarak Bashir. And Mubrarak is the regional director of Greystone's Rochester Center for Open Hiring. Prior to that, he was an Urban League of Rochester employee for over 11 years. And Mubrarak was recently recognized as one of Rochester Business Journal's 40 Under 40. Welcome, Mubrarak Bashir. Melissa Jordan is the Vice President and Business and Professional Banking Relationship Manager at M&T. Melissa is the founder and co-president of M&T's Rochester Women's Interest Network Employee Resource Group. She is notably recognized for her passion for helping women and minority-owned businesses succeed and thrive. Welcome, Melissa Jordan. Next, we have Dr. Deanna Kimbrel, who is Monroe County's first ever Chief Diversity Officer, and she leads the new Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. She is also the proprietor of the Kimbrel Management Consulting Group and an expert in leading programs and workshops on organizational culture and leading leadership and DEI. Welcome, Dr. Kimbrel. And last, we have Joshua Wu. He is a vice president at Edelman Data and Intelligence. He is a data science team lead. He advises stakeholders and clients on research and data best practices. He is also developing analytic-driven solutions to help inform the company's DEI efforts. He is active in the Asian Employee Resource Group and is co-leading a pro bono research partnership with Stop AAPI Hate. Welcome, Joshua Wu. First of all, again, welcome to our panelists, and we thank you all for being here today, all of the audience members. I want you to know I'll be fielding questions for our panelists towards the end of the session, and I encourage all of the audience members to ask questions, post them in the chat, and then we'll try to get to as many as possible. But let's begin the session. The panel title is Building Unity in the Workplace. I submit to those listening today, if we're serious about building unity in our country, we have to be serious and committed to establishing equity, diversity, inclusion, and justice. And as Juju reminded us today in her keynote, it also includes respect, compassion, and dignity. And without that, we cannot achieve unity. Our country continues to illustrate violent acts against religious and racial groups. Our society demonstrates its need to push towards racial equity. And in my opinion, we need more investment from everyone, and we have work to do. So Joshua, Melissa, Mubrarak, and Dr. Kimbrel are doing that work in their workplaces. Our experts represent local businesses and government. The panel leaders are going to share their experiences, which include successes and challenges that they face in implementing diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice programming. And they will share their recommendations for building unity in the workplace. Let me provide this note that the comments made by the panelists are their own opinion and representations of their own experiences. So although they work at the institutions that they represent today, they today are representing themselves, and their views and opinions are not necessarily the views and opinions of the employers that they serve. So let me begin by asking each of you to describe the DEIJ, so the equity, diversity, and inclusion and justice efforts you are seeing or leading in your respective workplaces. Now, we're going to go in the order opposite of which I introduced you. So we're going to begin right now with Joshua Wu.
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins. So I think here at Edelman, I think we have 4 main successes that I think I'm very proud of. So I think one is 2019, our CEO laid out very ambitious diversity and equity targets. And and we're proud to say that now in 2021, many of those targets have been met and actually are being expanded. So for example, in 2019, he committed to a 50% male-female gender breakdown in senior leadership. And now in 2021, we're there, right? And so I think, I think being very upfront about saying this is our commitment, and then, please hold us accountable. So secondly, is that I think the company is being very intentional about surveying and trying to understand what employees are saying. So instead of relying on just a few anecdotal stories, for example, we have a yearly employee surveys to try and measure how well is the company doing and what are the things that the company can do better. And I think thirdly, and perhaps most importantly, is that more than just talking about it, I think that the company is creating space and actually empowering and encouraging people to be involved in DEI initiatives. So from both earmarking time for pro bono work to actually investing intentionally in building out our DEI services. I think Edelman is trying to make sure that our commitment to DEI is not just something that we say, but it's actually something that we do and is core part of our company's culture and expectations for our staff.
Yeah, that's powerful, because you're not just talking about it, you're doing it, you're putting it into action. And I know Dr. Kimbrel knows a lot about putting things into action. You want to share a little bit about what you're doing in government? You're on mute, Dr. Kimbrel, just so you know.
Yes, that is the term of the year, right? You're on mute. Thank you. Well, absolutely. Well, as you guys know, and as Dr. Hawkins stated when she introduced me, this is the first time ever in our county's administration and our local government that we've had the Chief Diversity Officer role in the Department of DEI. So I would say, though, that is in itself is groundbreaking for our community as well as for Monroe County as an organization. So we are really, really in our infancy stage as it relates to DE&I, and really understanding the organization. Who do we have in the organization? So going beyond the basic analytics of gender and race, we want to look at who are disabilities, who have disabilities, who is of the LGBTQ plus community, who are caretakers, and those different things. So we are trying to understand who we have and then how we can support those individuals as well. We're also building a cadence of education. So again, since we are starting at the ground level, it is so important that we have a common understanding and language as it relates to DEI, and making sure our county executive, Adam Bello, is sharing that information across the organization so that they know this isn't just a program or for those that feels it as though it applies to them. This is an organizational shift and something that we will be doing throughout the county, and it is important to our administration as well. A few other things that we are seeing or that we're working on is making sure that we are strengthening our MWBE program, and we're actually creating a local program so that we can streamline that process and get more of our women and minority businesses opportunities within the county. We're also paying attention to language access. A lot of times that is secondary when we are serving people or even interacting with our employees, it becomes a secondary thought. So we're making sure that we have the support and resources where people, regardless of your English proficiency, we have already thought about that and have tools, whether you are Spanish speaking from a refugee community or from the deaf or hard of hearing community. So we're making sure that each department has a plan as it relates to that. We're also working through some local legislation that was put in place along with the department, and making sure that each department, and we have about 23 departments and about 5,000 employees internally. So ensuring that each department has a diversity action plan. Therefore, all efforts around DE&I are scalable across the organization. And everybody, although it will look different, is making sure sure they are paying attention to things like recruitment and hiring, developing a culture of inclusion, equity, and belonging, making sure there are measures and programs in place to promote and develop those of diverse backgrounds. So those are just some of the things that we're doing. And when I stepped into the role, one thing that was unexpected was being a support for our community. So that's also something that I'm working on as well, and working to develop a council, a CDO council of those in our community that do similar work, to have a collective voice around best practices, around addressing some of the community concerns as it relates to DE&I. So we have our work cut out for us. We have a lot of work to do. It is a journey. We are, again, in our infancy stage, but right now we are really working on our structure and making sure we have the tools, the resources, we know what exists, and then we are also implementing those local laws as well.
Thank you, Dr. Kimbrel. And again, lots of action steps that the county is taking. And I heard what your initiatives with MWBE, and I know Melissa knows a lot about MWBE services, but would love to have Melissa really jump in and share what M&T is doing.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this really at twofold. So, at a corporate level, M&T has done a great job creating a culture where everybody feels a sense of belonging, and that they really can be proud to be their true self at work. And that would be at all levels within the organization. There's not a day that goes by that you don't see and hear how we're working together to make a difference, whether that's within the bank, within our communities. I mean, you'll hear training sessions being offered to increase our education, fireside chats with all levels within the organization, top on down, recruitment efforts that are focused on it, multicultural banking initiatives, ability to offer candid feedback, blogs, resource group events. I mean, it's daily that you're seeing something or reading something about it. So, the feeling that all of our different backgrounds and perspectives are valued and welcomed, really, especially in the past few years, I have to say that's come to the forefront. Now, going now to Rochester, I'm going to reflect back to like 2019, 2020, when we had all the social unrest and injustice here, unfortunately, in Rochester. I remember getting on the phone with my co-president and founder of WIN, our women's interest group, resource group here in Rochester, saying, Mayor, we have to do something. We have to do something. What are we going to do? And we called our other two resource leaders, Andrew Stephen, who heads up our Pride group, and Keisha Washington, who handles Rock Strong. And the four of us collaborated, knowing full well that we'd have the support of our regional president, Dan Burns, who's on the phone here today, supporting me here as a panelist. But knowing that we would, we said, this is what we want to do. He's like, yeah, go for it. So we called town hall meetings together and really started out with educating and really providing a safe space for employees in Rochester, which quickly spread across the bank. People were saying, hey, you got to get on this panel and you got to hear what they're saying. Oh my goodness, and it went kind of, the train left the station, went full speed ahead, and these town hall meetings just really evolved, and I can talk more about it later. But so I would say from a corporate level, we have a lot of things in place, but then here locally, we have a lot of great things going on in Rochester.
Thank you, Melissa. Let's invite Mubrarak Bashir into the conversation, because you bring sort of the justice to it, the work that we've been doing. But talk a little bit about the work that you're doing at Grayston.
Yep. So at Grayston, our focus is creating an equitable and inclusive workforce. And by doing that, Grayston uses what we call an open hiring model. So just to give you a very brief background of what Grayston is a bakery based in Yonkers, New York. They make the brownies that go into Ben & Jerry's ice cream. Since the early 80s, Grayston has been using this open hiring model. And so what that means is when someone wants a job, an entry-level position at our bakery, we ask them 3 questions. Are you eligible to work in the US? Can you lift up to 50 pounds, and can you stand on your feet for 12 hours? If they can answer yes to each of those, we give them the opportunity to work. So at Grayston, we say we don't hire people to bake brownies, we bake brownies to hire people. So Grayston is using their business for the social good. About a year ago, Grayson wanted to scale this work, and Rochester, fortunately, was used as the first region to introduce this open hiring model. So for the past year, my work has been introducing this model to local businesses. And again, what open hiring does is it creates an inclusive workforce, but it also removes judgment. Someone can put their name on the list. We don't know if that person has involvement in the justice system. We don't know if that person was homeless, whether they have a visible or invisible disability. We give them an opportunity to work. So with scaling this work, what we're doing locally is we're working with local businesses that are looking to adopt this model. A lot of businesses that are looking to increase their diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts reach out because they need assistance with this, and that's where we come into play. When we look at the justice piece, and when I was at the Urban League, I worked with young people that didn't complete high school and also individuals that were returning from incarceration. There are way too many times that someone would come into the office and would basically be ready to give up because they weren't able to get an opportunity to work. And so what open hiring does, it removes those barriers for anyone. It's not a reentry program, it's geared towards anyone that faces barriers to employment. And so that's what we're doing here in Rochester. We're looking to scale this work, not just in Rochester, we've also established 2 other regional hubs, and we're continuing to work to make sure that we create not only an inclusive workforce, but we're also giving people an opportunity to work that are often screened out of positions.
Oh, that's powerful, just the opportunities that are created. Let's talk a little bit I invite all of the panelists to just jump in and let's just have some conversation about the successes. We'll talk about the challenges, but let's talk about the successes that you've seen. Dr. Kimbrel, I know you said the county's in its infancy stage, but let's talk about the successes that we've seen thus far.
I would really piggyback on what Melissa said. As we kind of move out of that social unrest of 2019, 2020, we see a willingness. And I think that's the biggest success, is the willingness to talk about these things, to implement these structures within organizations and really, really understand the importance of them. I see a lot of people having aha moments. Although these things have always existed, we see now how these things are impacting members of our society, members of our community. And we know now that we have to address them. No longer can we sweep them under the rug, put them to the side, or put them in the corner back in the back office. We need to put them at the forefront of our organization, the business that we do. So I think that's a #1 success that we see here, but also across the country, and that these issues are forefront into how we do business, how we communicate, how we educate ourselves. So I think that's the #1 success. I have seen people having the willingness to do this work. And as you know, Dr. Hawkins, that's the first step, the willingness to accept that it is an issue.
Yeah, I agree. That is so important. Melissa, I think you were going to jump in. Go ahead.
Yeah, so we offer employees every year 40 hours that they can volunteer out in the community. So one thing that we've been doing is pooling together different organizations and offering ways that employees can get out and make a difference. Because we spent probably about 1.5 years on the self-education piece, whether it was movies they can watch on Netflix and blogs and books and just articles and giving all this self-education and having these great conversations. And again, all at an employee level, all employee driven through the resource groups. It was then the employees wanted action. Okay, we have all this, we want to do something now. So that's where I kind of feel we are here in Rochester, is looking for ways on how we can act and make a difference.
Absolutely. Mubrarak, go ahead, jump on in.
Yes, I would say one of my biggest successes is just making sure that this word gets out there. I know open hiring was a new concept in Rochester, and I feel that we've made great progress, whether it be media attention or just businesses reaching out to learn about this. So personally, I think we've made some great movements with that. Another thing in Rochester is we often hear of silos, and so there are a number of businesses that I've been able to meet with that weren't ready to adopt open hiring. But through those relationships, I was able to connect them with other people in the community. So the good thing about that is I'm very strong on making sure that we're working together rather than in silos. And I don't want all the resources. I want to make sure that people are given an opportunity. So that's been great. When we look at the social impact, this is really the biggest thing for me. So probably within my first 6 months in this position, I had one of my former students from about 6 years ago reach out, and he said, I have these felonies, I can't get a job, I need help. And so right at that time, I had an employer reach out to me and mention that there were some positions opening up, they weren't doing a background check. I was able to refer that participant along with someone else to that position, and within a week, they began working in the construction industry. Not only that, I spoke to the one participant about a month ago. He received a raise and is also receiving benefits. So this is something he didn't have an opportunity with previously. Then when we look at the bakery, we did a documentary about one of our bakers. It was a young lady that had, she was a single mother, had several kids. She was at the point where she was ready to give her kids up because she just couldn't find work. She wasn't at the point where she felt that she could take care of her children. Fortunately, within maybe a month or a week or whatever the time frame was, she received a call from Greyston. She answered those 3 questions. She was ready to work. She was given an opportunity to work. So she had said, you know, Greyston gave her an opportunity. All she needed was a chance. Greyston told me yes when everyone else said no. From that time, she's still at the bakery. She was able to keep her kids. So we often look at personal success, but that's not what it is for me. It's the social impact that open hiring has when businesses use what they're doing for the good of the community.
Wow. Joshua, talk about some of the successes that you've seen.
Yeah, so I think 2 of them stand out to me. I think one is the fact that I think we are creating now lanes and opportunities for people to be allied to this work. I think for a very long time, you know, the people who've been doing DEI were very burdened because they felt very alone in their work, right? And you know, I think the lack of explicit sort of senior stakeholder sponsorship sort of dragged it down, where sort of people were doing this type of, you know, justice work sort of on the side or sort of or on top of their pre-existing work commitments. And I think now, as we see more and more companies begin to value it as not as a nice to have, but as actually part of their business model, then I think people are sort of feeling that, oh, you know, there are now people around me who can work together with me. I think secondly, too, is I think, you know, there's a lot of unexpected conversations that are happening in the background. So, you know, most of the work that we do are with corporate clients that have sort of, you know, unexpectedly reached out to us. And I think one of the things that we're seeing is that while they may not yet be ready for a sort of company-wide declaration or sort of statement, I think that there are a lot of people working behind the scenes to try and create the environment and to create the infrastructure so that when they are able to take a more tangible step, that those steps are not just a sort of, you know, one-time PR statement, but actually part of the launching of a integrated set of solutions.
That Joshua, you're reminding me how important it is that we highlight the successes, right? We've moved from an unwillingness, a very loneliness for those individuals that were doing this DEI work, not seeing them in senior positions, sometimes not seeing executive leaders support the DEI work that we want to see in organizations. You also highlighted really the work that everyone wants to see action. Right now, we're interested in seeing action. There's a willingness to do that. Melissa highlighted the self-education, not only for individuals, but for the employers to internally look at themselves and identify what work is necessary to do. And then collaboration. Thank you, Mubrarak, for highlighting the collaboration necessary to break down those silos and to truly create some social impact. And so these are all great beginning starts for us. Obviously, we still have work to do, and there are challenges that we face regularly. So let's talk about the challenges, but not just that, how we see that we can combat the challenges with the individuals that are listening today. How can they help? But talk a little bit about the challenges, and whomever wants to jump in, please do.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Hawkins, I just want to follow up what you said in regards to successes and challenges, or even turning those challenges into successes, or having the opportunity to do that. And at the county, I see our ability to increase or to create levels of accountability and sustainability. And I think we have seen that through the implementation of local laws as they relate to DE&I. So having a Department of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion is a part of the local law, as well as having a Chief Diversity officer is a part of the local law. So that means that even if administration changes, we still have to have this department, we still have to have this role. And the local law also applies to our MWBE program and how we will have that local certification and utilization program, as well as our language access position and requirements, and our diversity action plan. So that keeps us accountable to have these things no matter what is going on in the county. And it also becomes sustainable because it is not an option, right? Oh, my department doesn't need that. We don't need that. It becomes, since it is the local law, it becomes a requirement and everyone has to adhere to it. So I see the challenge of how to keep people accountable becoming a success through the implementation of many of the local laws that, it's put in place as a requirement and not as a nice to have or as a suggestion. I think I also see a lot of organizations struggle with transparency. And how do we be transparent around what our organization looks like? I've seen a lot of organizations not want to publish their diversity data, and that's something that we're working on and making sure that we have a dashboard so that people can see where we are and our plans to continue to move forward as it relates to our culture, as well as our diversity numbers and other things that are relative to that. So I see also in the government, there are some limitations around hiring and promoting as it relates to civil service. So that's also something that we're taking a look at and making sure that the civil service exam is more accessible, people understand how to take it, and then also advocating for actual change. Some ideas that have been put out there has been to make it a pass or fail. So instead of taking the top 3 scores, it actually becomes a pass or fail, and anyone that has, for instance, over 70% can be considered for a particular role. But also we have a few roles that are outside of the civil service, but implementing some DE&I structure around the way we are hiring, we are sourcing, and we are bringing people in around those roles. So I see those as kind of challenges, but opportunities that we can work on to become better and become stronger around DE&I. And those are just a few things.
Before Joshua jumps in, I just wanted to lift what you talked about with accountability. And accountability is critical because within your organizations or even in municipalities or government, it's up to the community to hold them accountable. And so here locally, we have our Rochester Power Broker Group, and we've acted as a body to hold the county and the city accountable for its action steps in creating equity, to create a more equitable Rochester. But how do you create, I would love to hear, maybe when we get to Joshua or Melissa, how do you do that within your organization, create accountability, especially as you're changing policies and practices? That's the work that has to happen. So let me stop and add Joshua, because I know you have a lot to say about that.
Yeah. And I think one of the core things, when we think about either transparency or accountability, is that I think that for a lot of organizations, DEI and sort of measuring diversity has not been part of our company's DNA, right? So if we're not measuring it in some way, how do we know that A, that we have a problem, or B, that we're making many progress? Right. So I think one of the big challenges we have is how can companies big and small come up with sort of company specific measurement and data policies that can help to highlight both where any discrepancies are, but also provide metrics and to be able to help people say, yes, we are making progress. So for example, when it comes to hiring, oftentimes because of privacy rules, we can't ask people what they're a racist, right? And so part of it is how can we be creative in understanding our talent pool or to understand our talent pipeline, right? And I think part of that is going to take a lot of intentionality, again, by corporate stakeholders and also by HR, but I think also a sort of imperative to say that, when we want to measure these things, it's not to shine a light on sort of all the things that we're not doing, but to say, this is our baseline. We can do better, but we have to know what that looks like. And I think Dr. Kimbrel, as you were saying, I think a lot of companies are hesitant to sort of share their data out outright, because I think they're just sort of like, I can't tell people that I'm at 70% of X, right? And I think part of that is, how do we normalize, or how do we encourage businesses to be doing internal data recording, and then only at some point be able to share in a way such that the light shine upon them is not to condemn them, but to say, this is where we are, but this is where we want to go.
Powerful, powerful. And I'd love to hear more about how you're doing that in your organization, because I know that you work with data and metrics to help the organization do that. And I hope that those that are listening are thinking about, how do we use our data to make more equitable decisions? Are we really analyzing the data to make those decisions? So that is powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Melissa, please jump in.
Yeah, the accountability is huge. I think it starts with everybody looking at themselves and where they are in their growth with diversity, inclusion, and belonging. Ways we can do that as resource groups is keeping the education fresh and alive, being top of mind in the forefront, continuing to be the voice. We're very blessed to have a work environment where we can be ourselves and our opinions matter. So being able to voice our concerns, whoops, sorry, my dogs are in the background, to voice our concerns if there's a policy or procedure that comes out, to give our thoughts on it. And we have employee engagement surveys to track measurements and results on lots of different things within the organization. But then too, annual performance objectives from, Dan, your level and my level and all the different folks within the bank, holding each other accountable to making sure we're out there in the community using our hours to volunteer and make a difference, that we are joining resource groups and making our voices heard, that we are doing reverse mentoring programs. We're doing that locally also. It's at all levels, and it's, I think, folks taking a good look at themselves, and you never stop learning, never stop educating, and be passionate about it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mubrarak, do you want to add?
Yeah, I'll just add, like, based on open hiring, I would say, well, first, I'm not a salesperson, and my work started cold calling businesses, so it was a challenge just saying to a business leader, remove interviews, let's get rid of background checks, remove all those barriers by giving people an opportunity to work. So that was the initial challenge. We have data that this is a successful business model from some of our other partners. Productivity increased. There was a decrease in turnover. So we have that data, but trying to convince a business that this is a smart business model was some of the initial challenges we had. And then also letting them know this isn't a reentry program. This is geared towards anyone. It could be people returning from incarceration, as I mentioned, people facing homelessness, the stay-at-home mom or dad that's been out of the workforce for a long period of time. So getting them to understand that, and understanding that you run the same risk of hiring someone that was incarcerated as you do to someone that has a degree in the workplace. And if you've done hiring, we've hired people with degrees that just weren't great employees. So think no matter what, all business leaders at some point had to take a risk in order for them to be successful. I don't consider open hiring a risk, but it's just trying to convince business leaders that this is a successful model. And that has been, I would say, the biggest challenge that we faced over the past year or so.
Yeah, and I think that, Mubrarak, great point. I think that Juju pointed out earlier in her keynote, the risk that comes with this DEI work. And so, Mubrarak, I can only imagine how challenging it has been for you to call individuals and do that cold calling and try to get them to change their mindset and take a risk on changing that mindset and create opportunities for individuals that are more vulnerable and have some, challenges maybe where they have a felony or not. And so just, can you talk a little bit about, are you still seeing that? What work do we need to do to support that?
Yeah, so I would say the benefit is that this challenge can also be a success for employers. If you go anywhere in the community, you can see now hiring signs all over the place. So now businesses are struggling to find people. So now it's time for them to think of innovative ways to make sure that they're increasing their job talent pool. And so what we've seen is within the past, I would say, like 3 or 4 months, businesses have been reaching out to figure out different ways. And so what we've done is we know that open hiring may be a big jump for some businesses. And so we say, okay, if you can't open up all those barriers, let's remove some of them. So maybe someone doesn't interview well. I don't know how many positions I've been screened out of because of maybe I don't interview better than someone else. But once I start working, I feel like I'm a great employee. So there are so many people in our community that are great workers that may just not interview well. And so we're screening them out of certain positions because of that barrier that they face. And so what we've seen is that employers are more open to learning because they need to find out ways that they can get people in the door. So some of our challenges, I think, eventually will turn into successes, and it'll also be successful for businesses because they need to figure out ways that they can get people to come into the door. So I would just say in the community, just creating introduction, right? So we can start talking about open hiring, talk about the benefits of open hiring, and we'll kind of walk along that process with business leaders to make sure that it works out seamlessly without any barriers or hiccups.
Thank you. So as we prepare to take questions from the audience, let me ask each panelist to share one call to action, one takeaway to support your vision or a vision for creating unity in the workplace, creating a more equitable workplace. What's the call to action? What needs to happen?
Dr. Hawkins, if I may, I would say that we need to move beyond the niceness, right? So I think that we kind of have, we have that interpersonal racism. I think we have identified that and we are educating ourselves and moving toward that. We need to focus on the institutional racism and the institutional biases that keep people oppressed, that keep people in marginalized positions or so have you. So I think it's important that we focus on our systems. What can we do in our policies and the way that we hire people and the way that people are promoted and those different things to ensure that those processes are equitable? And just like Joshua said, how are we making sure that we are measuring these? So we can say that we're doing something, but we need to be able to measure the effectiveness of that so that we have diversity representation at all levels. People are able to grow and at the same time be who they are and not have to assimilate. So I think it really is looking at our processes, our procedures, because I think that is our biggest return on becoming more equitable and more inclusive.
Interrupting old systems, right? Dismantling racism. Thank you, Dr. Kimbrel, for lifting that. Joshua, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think that today we need to think about DEI not as a moral imperative, or not just as a moral imperative, but as a business need, right? As core to business today. One of the stories that we talk a lot about in our line of work is Beyonce walks into a Reebok. She looks in the room and there's no one that looks like her, and she walks out, right? And I think that, obviously, probably none of us will be working with Beyonce, or maybe. But I think one of the things that I think we need to think about is if we do not bake or if we do not build DEI into who we are as a company, what business are we losing out on, right? In the marketplace today, DEI is now a expectation. Companies are expected to be able to talk about their diversity, to talk about what they're doing, even if it's a small step, to say, I am going to be uplifting XYZ. And I think, as we continue to face challenges in hiring, and as people are thinking about where they want to work and the types of workplaces that they want to go to, they will be expecting that the firms that they work for are in fact trying to pursue justice, are in fact trying to be more inclusive. And so I think, as companies, we need to think very hard about the desire and the need to make DEI so central to what we do, such that we are not losing businesses and not losing out on otherwise a great staff.
Yeah, Joshua, thank you for sharing that. First of all, I want to work with Beyonce. I don't know about any of you, right? I'm hoping I'm getting closer to her, but the value, what are you losing? What is your company losing by not making the investment in diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice? And that's powerful. And that is, what we have to help companies understand, that there is value. I was just looking at Corning, and Corning, they have a huge investment in how they're number 3 company to work for in New York State. because they've made this investment. They jumped from 17 to 3 because they did their work. So they saw the value. And so talk about, Melissa, what you believe, what's the call to action, especially for someone that's working in financial institutions? What's that call?
Find your passion. Get involved, be fearless, get comfortable with being uncomfortable and having those candid conversations, and just use your voice to make a difference. You know, I'm passionate. I kind of switched careers at M&T recently, and I'm passionate about helping women and minority-owned businesses and be the voice and the connector out in the community and getting involved. And I think that's what folks need to do is find their passion, get involved, make a difference.
Thank you. You have to be passionate. I hear your passion. You have to be passionate. You have to be fearless and willing, as Dr. Kimbrel pointed out earlier, willing to take a risk. You have to do that. Mubrarak, what's the call to action?
Yeah, so I think when we look at data, it shows that for people, especially among millennials, that they're more likely to remain at a business or a company if there's a diverse workforce. So I think that's key. Open hiring has that ability to create a diverse workforce, but by doing that, there's also responsibility that comes with that. It's one thing to have a diverse workforce and then embrace and respect other differences that are within the company. I think back to a meeting I participated in a few years ago, and there was a bunch of people with different backgrounds, and it was on racism. And we had very uncomfortable conversations. But from those uncomfortable conversations, it led to so much understanding that when people left, you could tell it was just a great environment. And so that's what we need to do in the workplace. You have to be able to have those uncomfortable but respectful conversations. And I think that will definitely help and go a long way with businesses. So one of the things that we have a business leader reach out to me and he says, you know, we're ready to move forward with open hiring. The first question I ask is, what about your leadership team? They're going to start working with an entirely different demographic of people. And so if they can't work with certain individuals, you can say you're doing open hiring, but it's not going to work. The entire culture of the organization has to be changed. And so that's some of the things that we're also doing is working with leadership and management and creating workshops to make sure their leadership is able to work with everyone in the workplace.
Thank you for lifting that, Mubrarak, because it is a culture shift. And you can't just think that you can go in as the leader of the organization and say, you know what, I'm feeling really confident. I'm going to have some uncomfortable conversations today. That's not going to work out well. Just trust me, it won't work out well. And so talk about the preparation, because as I'm listening, I already know that this work is not easy. It takes a lot of work. So talk about, one, resources that are available. I think about at the Urban League, we take organizations through a guided journey. It's a 12-month journey to help them make that cultural shift, to go through the policy changes and practices. Talk a little bit about what you're doing as we capture questions from the audience, but want to know, because we want folks to know this is not easy work. And we know folks that are here today already are invested, but what are the resources that are available? Dr. Kimbrel, you want to jump in?
Yeah, definitely. I wanted to say that, you know, when we think about this, like you said, we just don't want to jump in and say, hey, we're going to start doing this. It really is a cultural shift. And you really want to make sure that you are intentional around the way that you are doing things. So you want to make sure that you are having impact over activity. And I think we talked about that earlier this week, Dr. Hawkins. How do you have an impact over just doing? So we see a lot of times, especially me coming in to different roles, and there's a to-do list. We need to do this, and we need to do that, and we need to do that. But I think it's very important to educate and really create that cadence of understanding and giving people the permission. Because when we think about historically what has happened in organizations, we have not discussed these things. So we have to start with a common language, and then we have to have the permissions to say that it is okay. This is how we do it. This is important to the organization. This is why it's important. So I think that it's very important for the organization to put a focus on how they are educating, how they are embedding DE&I into the the culture, how they are providing the permissions and the common language to have these discussions. So, I think it's a process. I don't think that every organization should start out with these conversations. They, implicit bias training is not always the answer. It really, really is embedding it into your culture and making people feel comfortable. And I know someone in the chat said something about fear. Fear is one of the biggest things that will keep us, that will keep us from evolving around DE&I and these different things, especially in the workplace. So how do we start addressing that fear and making sure that people know that it's okay? Because there is a culture of silence around these things. So how do we start to do that?
So before I get to the question in the chat, I'm going to ask Joshua to jump in and just add to that too. Thank you, Dr. Kimbrel.
Yeah, and I think for me, I think what in my time where I am, without senior management and without sort of a manager saying this is important to us, right? I think many of these efforts can fail, right? And so I think one of my encouragements is for people who are in positions of leadership to say this is something that we want to do. Now, you yourself may not be able to actually lead that, but I think sort of being very upfront and saying this is something important that we need to do, and I will find the resources and time and money to go and do it. I think that's going to be critical as we work on changing the culture.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I want to see, take a question from, thank you. That was powerful. Culture changes are critical. And so as we talk about culture change, we have a question from Lori, who says, how can local businesses and Monroe County government leverage the work you are all advocating to impact? Who's teaching our children and youth in Monroe County how they're being taught and what they're learning? Suburban districts are all woefully lagging in representation and staff and in culturally responsive practices and curriculums. Perhaps if hiring experts such as expect such background from students, schools will respond and resist populations and will see the value to them. So what can we do? And can I lead with Dr. Kimbrel?
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for that question, Lori. And I think that's a great question. And it really is a collective process, right? There's not one organization, not one agency, not one entity that can move in those things, especially as it relates to our community, especially as it relates to our children. So we have to be collaborative and we have to be have a collective voice on these things in order to have an impact. From non-for-profits, from corporate organizations, we really have to come together, because the more that we come together and the increase in numbers of us coming together, the larger the impact that we can have on these policies and on the way in which people are hired. So I think it really is about us coming together. You do see a lot of suburban schools now having chief diversity officer roles or focusing on equity. So how do we bring those things together? And again, that's one of the things that I'm working on the CDO Council to do through Monroe County, is to bring people from all over the county that do this work, so that we can have a collective voice and understand what are the issues in our community. Most often we are solving for our organization, but how do we get together and solve for our community? So, I mean, I'm hoping that's one way that Monroe County can bring people together as it relates to some of these things. And then we have several different partnerships and several different programs that are going on that will also support that. But I think it really is our collective voice and having an impact on these things.
Yeah, collaboration, collective work. That's the way we do it, as Mubrarak shared earlier, not working in silo. Let me take a last question. And this is from Sandra. Hi, Sandra Katz. We know when, first of all, when leaders know that DEI is a journey, we all know that, and they might stop checking the box, right? What are ways that you've invited people to walk the path, not just check the box, not just do a training to get it done, right? Deanna, Dr. Kimbrel, you talked, I heard you talk early in the week about not taking on training when an organization wants to do a one-time, one-off training. And I certainly lift that philosophy that that's not what we want. That's checking the box. How do we get organizations to move from checking the box? And checking the box comes from a willingness to want to do something and maybe not knowing what they need to do, but how do we get them on the right pathway to do this work?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely add to that and say that it has to be a part of the leadership strategy. Like Joshua said, it has to be embedded into the organization and the way in which they do business. So if it is a way in which you do business, then you cannot escape that. That is a part of you doing your job. So I would definitely uplift that and say that it has to be a leadership strategy. It has to be a part of them being a leader. They have to be held accountable for it, and they have to be measured around that. And I think that, and for me, when I think about DE&I, I really think about the leaders. So how do we prepare the leaders? Because these are the people that are working with their teams each and every day. How do we prepare the leaders to understand how to create a culture of DE&I, how to cultivate that? And I think it's the organization's responsibility to provide the tools and resources, but the leaders are driving that, and also all employees throughout the organization is responsible for DE&I. So I think that when you have a culture and it is embedded into how you do things, it definitely moves beyond checking that box.
And Dr. Hawkins, I wish you could unmute Dan and he can talk about what we're doing, but we have initiatives that talk about this time's going to be different, and really looking at the needs in the community and how we can react to those needs at different levels. We here at the bank, we connect with so many people, we have so many resources that we can connect people with, and that's what we're doing, connecting our customers with to help each other, because if the community is better, everybody's better. And just from an employee standpoint, those resource groups help. I think they help management too. So I encourage people to start employee-driven resource groups, create that safe space, meet employees where they're at. I mean, I never would have thought we would have had the conversations we had in a corporate world that we had. And wow, it's like, whew, so refreshing that you can have these conversations, and it's all right and it's welcomed. And I think when you can get to that point that you create that safe place, employees are comfortable speaking, management learns. They learn and they want to react. They want to do well too. So that's what we need to do. We need to create those safe spaces and start it small, like little lean-in circles. If you've read the book Lean In, for women, but you can apply that concept to anything. Start small.
Yeah, those
and
ERG groups are so important, Melissa. Thank you for mentioning
Yeah.
that, because the employee resource groups are where those caucus activities begin, but where we begin to have the tough conversations and give people brave spaces to speak and talk and give them voice. And so we're going to wrap up because we have 2 minutes left. But I just want to say, first of all, to the audience members, thank you for your questions. I see Kevin has put a great point in there. So thank you all for listening. I just wanted to give Joshua, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about the importance of ERGs, the employee resource groups, because I know that you lead them in your organization. You lead one in your organization.
Yeah, and I think what I would say is that I think, these things on the one hand can be scalable, but I think need to start with just a few people saying, we want to learn more, we want to get involved, right? And I think one of the things that, for me, I focus a lot on how can we encourage managers to empower their staff to say, I want to be involved, and then to sort of create protected time to say, okay, now you go and do this now, right? And so I think, as we think about these ERG groups, right, I think that oftentimes they're sort of seen as these sort of, oh, if we have these things, then, it's going to make our staff less productive. But in fact, I think these groups actually empower our staff to show up at work with their full authentic self. And then I think if we see that as part of a way to develop our staff, then I think that we can see these groups less as this sort of a nice to have, but as part of a essential element of our workplace culture.
Thank you. Thank you, Joshua, for just sealing that for us. We appreciate it. Thank you again to all of our panelists for the engaging conversation. Let me close by stating, if we truly seek unity, we have a responsibility to ensure we dismantle and interrupt racism. We must not allow our country, our community, or our workplaces to normalize inequities. As our panelists have proven today, workplaces are stepping up. And I'm so grateful for the work that you all are doing, prioritizing diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice in your organizations. Thank you for using your energy, your power, and your privilege to help bring unity by way of equity in the workplace. So a huge thank you to the audience for listening, but also to our panel. We are grateful for your participation. To the audience, please be sure to complete the survey that you will receive at the end of today's event to give us feedback, and keep an eye out on further resources on this and other topics. There is going to be a 5-minute break, so you will go back to your next session in 5 minutes, so at 2:05. But again, thank you, Dr. Kimbrel. Thank you, Mubrarak Bashir. Thank you, Melissa Jordan and Joshua Wu. Thank you for your leadership and dismantling and interrupting racism. To everyone else, have a wonderful day and enjoy the rest of the summit. Take care.